Hi there, welcome. This is Casey, and in today's video, I am going to be doing an iris reading, and we're going to start the reading out by taking a more bird's eye view approach. So I do have both of the eyes on the screen, and I'm just going to give you my first impressions of these eyes. So we do have a true brown iris, and you can see that in the velvety texture along with, of course, the color. In a true brown iris, you will not see visible iris fibers. So the texture is more velvety rather than cotton or linen or silk. And with a true brown iris, typically you are going to see a strong constitution, and that is the case. Here I do see this as a strong constitution, and of course with some challenges. So what you may see in terms of iris features in a true brown iris are radii solaris. So we do see a few radii solaris. The most significant one I'm seeing is in this right eye in the kidney and adrenal area. And then we do have some also in the left eye, so you will see that in brown eyes, and you will also see quite often markings within the stomach and bowel area. So within here we can definitely see we have some openings within the iris fibers, even some lacuna, even possibly some crypts. So, and I will note that in terms of this person's health, what she has asked me to look at, what she felt relevant in terms of her family health history and what's going on with her, is the digestive system. So we are seeing right away that there are possible challenges in the stomach and bowel area, as well as she has experienced or is experiencing some level of brain fog. So we can see that in the right eye we have several radii solaris emanating from the stomach and bowel area, especially the transverse colon, extending into some significant brain areas. So we'll take a look at that more specifically when we get to the eyes in more detail. And we're also going to be looking at how trauma may make its presence known through the lens of iridology within the iris. So in this case, we're going to be looking at these. To me, one of the first things I noticed about these eyes were these striking nerve rings here. So fairly significant, and for the most part, aside from this one that's a little bit more deeper into the system, for the most part these nerve rings are located on the periphery of the iris. So we're seeing them affecting more so the skin, so the outside of the body, more so the skin zone and into the lymphatic zone. All right, and we're also going to be looking at the health of the female reproductive system and several other things. I have notes here, and we'll see what comes through. I do want to note, while we have both eyes on the screen, that there are more significant markings in the right iris from my perspective. So the right side of the body, especially with that kidney and adrenal, could be experiencing more stress or taking the brunt of the workload, or any kind of stress that's coming into the body. It could also certainly be hereditary. When we see this, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone has a weaker, experiences more weakness on that side of the body. It may in fact be the opposite. It could be the more dominant side of the body. So I'm not quite sure with this person, but we are seeing a lot more going on in the right eye than the left. But for the most part, they are pretty similar. You know, we're seeing nerve rings in both eyes. We're seeing stomach and bowels in both eyes. I'm not seeing a lot up in the head and brain area in the left eye. And then that brings me to probably the last thing I'll say while I have both the eyes up. While these photos were taken by a professional, and you actually can see in the right pupil the reflection of the camera. This person wasn't super experienced with iris photography, so while we do have great quality for the most part, and I can see what is needed for me to do a thorough iris reading, we do have a few challenges in terms of reflections and lights. Okay, so you can see in both eyes we have the eyelashes, and you can see in the left eye actually we have the eyelashes, but I can tell that these are radii solaris here, so we can work through it, right? And then we have the eyelashes here, and then of course that's what is covering most of the left eye in the head and brain area are the top eyelashes. But again, I don't really see anything significant that's coming through, even through the eyelashes. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to get the chart, and we're going to start with the right eye. All right, so we have up on the screen now the right iris, and going to start in the center, and we're going to note the health of the stomach lining as seen in the pupillary margin, and also that of the central nervous system. And her pupil to me looks really good. It looks perfectly round. I'm not seeing a lot of jaggedness or unevenness in the pupillary margin, but I am seeing a lot of lacuna, and even these little diamond shaped lacuna that appear to be very dark, could even be considered crypts in iridology terms. But to keep it simple, we have a lot of openings indicating weakness, even possible bowel pocketing in the stomach area, or in the stomach and intestines, I should say. So even though we're not seeing major signs of malabsorption or gastritis or anything like that, according to the pupillary margin, we are seeing so many markings emanate from the pupillary margin that I wouldn't be surprised if there was some level of challenge with nutrient absorption. And then I also want to note, and we'll be going back to the stomach and bowels, especially as it relates to other anatomy that we're going to see in the iris. But if I were to sort of trace out as best I can see it, the bowel wall, we can see that we do have a dropping in the transverse colon area, so that usually indicates a possibility of prolapsus or presence of prolapsus on some level. And then we also have a bit of ballooning, but it's not in the colon, so it wouldn't necessarily be ballooning per se, but we do have this extension out in this area here, which is the small intestine area. Okay, and then I am seeing specifically this darkness in this area and this amount of numerous lacuna in this area could be related to, it's in the duodenum area and very close to the gallbladder and liver. And when we're talking about The duodenum specifically, we're talking about that area, that last part of the stomach where the pancreatic juices are secreted by the pancreas, and as well the bile is secreted by the from the liver by the gallbladder. So we could have some challenge with digestion in terms of the gallbladder and the pancreas, possibly. And then the digestive system is Manipura chakra, or the solar plexus. And so energetically speaking, this is known in Sanskrit as the city of jewels, or lustrous gem. So this center, and you can just take it on whatever level of health you're experiencing. In its healthiest form, it is the center of dynamism. It is the center of confidence, of purpose, of shining your light, confidence. Did I say that? Somewhat to do with willpower and strength. So on an energetic level, these qualities could be a bit dampened down, or possibly have been in the past. Okay, so I think I'm going to go straight into, from here, we're going to look at these radii solaris, especially right along, they're coming directly out of the stomach. But if this is the bowel wall, which it appears to be to me, we're also looking at the transverse colon. Okay, so these are fairly significant, and this one in particular would normally be extending. If it were to extend straight up, it would be extending into the animation in life brain center. So that is energy, that is zest and excitement and joy for life. And that is also somewhat related to in terms of, in energetic terms, we're also speaking to the crown chakra, so the direct connection to source. So that's actually not showing up as a brain center. If it were, you would see a dark line or some kind of marking in this area, but we're not necessarily seeing that. But it's interesting that the area below it is definitely being highlighted. And then we do have other brain centers that are very, very close to it. But we have, all of this along from within the stomach and along the transverse colon showing up. So I want to talk a little bit about these brain centers. And while I'm thinking of the animation and life center, we do definitely have the pituitary gland, which is right in this area, making an appearance as a possible weakness in the pituitary gland. And then we have, along with that, the five senses brain zone. So the five senses brain zone is pretty much, it has the qualities that its name implies. It is related to the five senses in the body. And let me just get my notes here on brain zones, see if I can see anything else. It's definitely, Dr. Jensen notes that when you see the five senses brain zone, to check the sense organs. And I do recall seeing the ear and maybe like the nose, and I'm not sure what else in terms of the sense organs, but I do think there is some significance here that we will be exploring. So the five senses are And this is actually according to Farida Sharan. I'll just read you a quick quote from her. She says the five senses area, and she studied, this is very closely related to Jensen's work. The five senses area involves visual, auditory, gustatory, olfactory, and tactile senses, but also the sensory memory and the senses of emotional pain and pleasure. So when we're looking at these brain zones, whether you're seeing a dark streak or a light streak, or it seems to be acute or chronic, for me, I like to study all of the aspects, the positive and the negative. So in the positive sense, we have the beauty and the fullness of life with all of the senses and pleasure. In the negative sense, we could have these things dampened down or shoved down, or we could have sort of turned them off ourselves. So when we're healthy, we enjoy the beauty and fullness of life, fully alive and fully aware. And a hypoactivity can be impaired sensation, guilt, self-denial, and criticism. All sensory signals from the body are received here, including temperature and pain awareness. Okay, so that's the five senses area. And then the other brain zone that I'm seeing, and these two are definitely somewhat related, is sensory locomotion. And that is in this area here. And sensory locomotion is the mid-cortex sensory motor zone, and it coordinates how our senses guide us to stand and move in this world. It works closely with the five senses brain zone as it integrates mental and physical function and controls movement. This brain zone influences the sensations that guide us to know where we are: heat, cold, pain, touch, pressure, movement, and tension. It also affects the more subtle functions of perception and reactions to sound or light, as well as muscle coordination, strength, and fatigue levels. When abnormal, the person suffers from lack of coordination and inhibited movements accompanied by fear, uncertainty, and lack of confidence. And the cerebrum and the cerebellum receive sensory nerve impulses from the muscles and joints and correlate these with impulses from visual, auditory, and other sensory centers: heat, cold, touch, pressure, movement, and position in space. Motor impulses are then sent to initiate and control muscle responses for walking and other bodily movements. So in its normal, healthy expression, we have proprioception, touch, heat, cold, pressure, muscle coordination, somatic memory. And then in its low-level expression, we can have awkwardness, imbalance, insensitivity to touch, heat, cold, pressure, inactivity, somatic forgetfulness. So here we have the correlation, as I mentioned, between the two brain zones. And Dr. Jensen notes that when this brain zone is activated, especially in an unhealthy sense, it will activate the adrenal glands. And we do see a pretty major marking in this right adrenal gland. And although these are not directly diagonal, they do have a relationship in terms of, in physiologically speaking anyway. Okay, and then the next brain zone that I want to talk about, and I'm not even certain, I feel like I see darkness in this area, which is related to the sexuality brain zone. It could be a shadow, but I do want to mention it in case it is in fact a lacuna in that area. I mean, let me know if you guys see anything in there. It's a little bit difficult, but I'm seeing it right in here, a pretty dark spot. And yes, there are shadows and reflections, but I'm going to just go ahead and touch on this. So, and before I do, I want to mention, just because we've been talking about the five senses and the perception of pain and pleasure and all of these things that come along with that, and what we're about to talk about, that I did mention in the beginning of the video the topic of trauma. And this person has experienced, unfortunately, many years of her life, physical and mental, verbal abuse, unfortunately. So I'm looking at these different brain zones, and I'm keeping that in mind. And for me, it's definitely resonating. And it also certainly does resonate with the nerve rings that we're seeing. And I'm going to talk about that more towards the end of, when we get to the end of this iris. I believe I'll talk about the nerve rings then. Just because they are sort of on the periphery and in this more of the skin, like the surface of the body. And so I think that could be tied in to that trauma that she has experienced. And also it's interesting because I mentioned all of the senses, and I noted that Jensen said to check the different sense organs. And certainly we are seeing, because of the nerve rings, we're seeing a significance and a focus on the sense of touch and the skin, because we're seeing the nerve rings in the skin zone. And I'm also seeing something of a skin ring. Okay, so that's kind of why if I am seeing a darkness in this area, I do want to mention it. So this is the sexuality brain zone, and it is named by Dr. Jensen, sex impulse and mental sex. So he says it's in the right eye only, and it is related to, if you draw a diagonal from that mental sex area, you are going to, a straight diagonal line would be the uterus and the sex organs. Okay, so he says there is a principle of vitality and sexuality that permeates and energizes all other aspects of life. Personal magnetism, charm, virility, and femininity are influenced most by the sexual principle. This is the primitive survival center associated with the brainstem and its reticular activating system from medulla to midbrain. Its prominent feature in our time is the sex drive, but it also includes the family instinct, especially motherhood. And here we also have fight or flight. As well, we see the fight or flight instinct very much in the adrenal gland. But this would be more like fight or flight syndrome, where you feel like you're always in fight or flight. And let's see, the high levels of expression are family instinct, motherhood, fatherhood, sexual attraction, excitement, passion, creativity, confidence, and healing. And in its lower levels, it can indicate, as mentioned, fight or flight, possessiveness, and fear of the opposite sex, impotence, sterility, loneliness, frigidity, and dark radii solaris in this area can indicate a history of sexual abuse as well. Okay, so I'm just noting that, and I'm not 100% sure if that brain center is highlighted, but I feel like this area is pretty dark, and there's a very good chance that it is. So whether it's in its highest expression or lower expression, like I said, there's always that range. You know, it's a spectrum, and so when you when you're talking about brain zones and really a lot of things, you're looking at, like, if you're looking at one end of or the other of the spectrum, it's all connected. It's all sort of existing simultaneously. It's just that we will experience it in different forms, if that makes sense. All right, so moving on, we're seeing also really very close to this sexuality center, the medulla. brain zone. So we're just seeing a lot of brain zones, and I want to talk about how, let me first just mention a couple things about the medulla. So Jensen says is a vital brain center containing respiratory, cardiac, and vasomotor centers. It controls expiration, circulation, heart activity, oxidation of blood, and some sensory motor functions. And he says when the medulla is weak, the heart is weak and the lungs are feeble. And actually I have seen, we'll talk about the heart. It's going to be located in the left iris. Her heart actually looks pretty good. And he says the medulla begins operating before birth and continues until the time of death. The medulla at the top of the brainstem, along with the vagus 10th cranial nerve, controls respiration and diaphragmatic coughing, hiccuping, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting, as well as salivation, heart regulation, vasomotor response, facial expressions, hearing, digestive, and other paramount nervous system survival and balancing mechanisms aimed at the preservation of vital functions in daily life and during times of stress. Dark lacunas inform potential inherent weakness activation through toxins, compression, physical trauma, and stress. Okay, and then these nerve rings do go through all through this area. So when you have nerve rings going through an area, it is indicating an increase in whatever stress may be going on in that area. It's just more confirmation that there is disturbance in the area. Okay, and then while we're here in this area, I want to note, because I did mention that I thought I saw the ear, which it's always interesting to see, you know, just like what you would sort of consider random anatomy, but it usually, a lot of times I've gotten feedback from people that there is a significance. So that's the ear coming through. There's a radii solaris going through there, and very closely connected to the ear is the neck. And so there could be some tension or pain in the right neck area. And then other than that, aside from this nerve ring here, I'm not really able to see a whole lot in this area. That is the lung area. And I'm not able to see a lot, but I'm also not like picking up that there is a lot. Okay, so let's go back around and we will look at the last brain zone that we're going to talk about, and that is the mental ability brain zone. And I did mention towards the beginning of the video that this person experiences brain fog on some level. And I know that that term probably, I'm not even really sure technically what it means. I think it means what it sounds like, you know, forgetfulness, fogginess, but I almost remember reading about it one time and there was more to it. But she does experience brain fog, and I'm just going to take that on the level that I'm able to understand it. And when you're looking at brain fog in terms of iridology, I've seen other people that have, you know, talked about brain fog and listed that as something that they would like me to address. And a lot of times it's, you know, just a ton of lymphatic congestion. And a lot of times it is like this discoloration that begins in the transverse colon, just like everything is beginning in the bowel, and it sort of just creeps up into the head and brain. But there's another aspect of brain fog that could definitely be seen through the lens of iridology, and that would be this brain center, this mental ability brain center. And I should note also in this brain center, actually even almost more importantly to me is this down at the bottom of the brain zone area, right on the edge of the transverse colon. And this would be the area, this would be, let's see, I believe it's one of the flexures in the colon. So it is an area that's commonly like throwing off toxins. And I did cover this in my last video on digestion that I did. But anyway, we have the pineal gland here. Very significant. So we have pituitary, pineal, both considered psychic centers. The pineal gland even more so is considered as the third eye, and it is psychic sight, intuition, perceptions that come in through light, that create impressions in the emotional and psychic and physical bodies. And then of course it's related to, it's somewhat still considered something of a mystery gland, but it's very much related to cycles and sleep and rest. And to me that is, it's like reflecting the qualities of light and darkness, the pineal gland. So we have that showing up. And so this one has ordered from me, along with an iris reading, she is getting a botanical blueprint. So I'm going to be formulating a formula for her. I'm going to be coming up with what I'm getting as the key plants for her health, her physical and emotional and spiritual well-being. And I'm not really going to go over that in this video, but I just want you to know that I am doing that for her. And I am going to mention as things come in, I'll mention a few plants. And what I'm getting for these two brain centers, I mean, for the pituitary gland, you're going to be looking at saw palmetto and chaste tree berry. But what I'm getting, so I will include those probably in a tincture rather than a tea, because they're a little bit, they have an interesting taste. But one plant that is like her plant that I'm getting intuitively is passion flower. And so if you know that plant, you know it has this beautiful exotic flower, and then it does produce the passion fruit, which is just, you know, exotic and delicious. So I am recommending passion flower, and that is a nervine, so that's going to be very helpful to the nervous system. It's relaxing, it's calming, but it's not necessarily sedating. And passion flower it's the herb is, you know, it's called passion flower because it's known for its flower, but it actually is in the leaf form, and it is pleasant tasting. So I want to mention that while I'm thinking of it. And then, yeah, saw palmetto and chaste tree berry for the pituitary. For the pineal gland, if one is having trouble with sleep, or if they just want more, if they want to have melatonin in a natural form, I know that chaga mushroom is high in melatonin. Okay, so, but let's get to, and then of course I'm going to be adding herbs for the brain fog and for the whole entire brain area. So we're going to get into ginkgo, bacopa, I think. Anyway, I don't want to get all sidetracked. So mental ability is here, and it is an extension, or it's definitely connected to the pineal gland and the properties or qualities of this zone. This area of the iris corresponds to the frontal and prefrontal cerebral cortex, the section of the brain where we organize experience. It is not surprising that it is located to Broca's speech area. This is according to Jensen, by the way, in the left hemisphere and the corresponding area of the right, where we may assume that the neural organization for language has influenced the way we organize our experiences, perceptions, and ideas about the world. And he says this prefrontal and frontal zone encourages intelligence, logic, reasoning, memory, willpower, and voluntary movement. In its lower aspects, we can have blocked inspiration. We can be operating, how do I explain this? In a way where we're not operating at full capacity. We're not utilizing all of the creativity that we have, and that could be in our work or in our daily lives. And then in its more positive sense, it is utilizing, all of your life force and inspiration to bring your ideas to fruition. For some reason, I want to just highlight the outside of this iris so that we have, no, that just looks better to me. And then while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and note there is a little bit of a darkness. Can you see that on the very edge of the iris? And this is the skin zone. So she does have something of a skin ring. And that can indicate that the skin it just can indicate problems, skin problems, or just that the skin is not, you can have beautiful skin and have a skin ring, but it indicates that toxins aren't able to be processed through the skin like they should be. Okay. I'm not seeing a whole lot in this area. There was an interesting shading, if you can see right in here, and that's somewhere close to the lower jaw. Tongue and mouth, but it's not a a normal iris feature, so I'm not quite sure, but if you see that, no, I see it too. And then I'm also seeing a little bit going on in the parathyroid gland right in here. And we would be normally checking the parathyroid gland when we see any kind of possible prolapsing, which we did. So there could be some slight weakness in the parathyroid. Thyroid looks pretty good. I'm not seeing too much. It's a little blurry in here. Okay, and then I want to just see where we're at in terms of, so we're still in the small intestines in this area in here, but there is definitely a marking right there, and that is the small intestines, and then outside of it is the back. So it could be some tension in the back, the scapula area. And then the next major feature that I can see is this area of darkness in here, and that is the bladder. And it's also very close to, and I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't connected to the female organs, the uterus and vagina. So, but mainly I'm seeing it as bladder. Okay, and then we have this area of the bowels is the cecum, and I did talk about that quite a lot in my last video on the digestive system. So the cecum is the very beginning of the ascending colon. And if we're looking at the ileocecal valve, then we can have, what we're looking at is the connection between the small intestines and the large intestines. And within this area, we're seeing this significant radii solaris coming from the cecum, and it is the adrenal and kidney. Okay, so it's not surprising we're seeing so much going on in this right eye, and then we have a correlating connection also with a weakness in the right kidney and adrenal gland. For herbs for this, I'm getting rose. Rose is, and I just love to use rose. I'll be using rose buds for this in tea form, and the rose is an adrenal tonic. And then I'm getting probably nettle, because nettle is like this one of the superstars of healing and detox plants, and especially related to the kidneys. But mainly I'm getting Pipsissewa and I believe this person, I believe she is located in California. I'm not 100% sure. That's where I am, in Northern California. And Pipsissewa is a very special plant that I wildcraft myself, and it's native, just, you know, very specific to Northern California and the corresponding area around Northern California in the forest. So when you have a native plant, you know, as opposed to weeds, you're picking it in the forest, you're harvesting it in the forest. And for me, that's in the pine forest, so it's special to me. And it's just a superstar in terms of kidney filtration and healing the kidney. So I would say that this lacuna in the kidney and adrenal gland is one of the more prominent features in this eye, and even in both eyes. Okay, so that's kidney and adrenal gland. And then let's take a look. I want to clear this out. We'll see if we see anything else. Okay, so this area in here is definitely calling out to me, and this is the upper abdomen, but it's also the ovary right in here. I would say this is probably the ovary right here. Do you see that? And inside of that we have the pancreas. And actually this one's mom has I thought she said that her mom had diabetes, but nothing, you know, serious. So that could be, the pancreas could be inherited, but we do definitely see the ovary right there. And she did tell me that she has a cyst. I'm pretty sure she said the right ovary. So that would be that. And I just want to erase this so you can see that again. So that's the ovary and a bit in the pancreas and just that whole area of, again, the cecum. And then we're going to get up into the duodenum up in here, and we're going to see the liver. Okay, so we have ovary here, and there is a nerve ring going through that ovary, which gives it, it makes even, it emphasizes it even more. And then we also have a nerve ring. So I'm seeing this area in here as the liver gallbladder coming out of the duodenum. So I'm seeing this as the liver. Not a whole lot going on in the liver, but something. There's a little bit of shading in there. So, and it's significant because that same nerve ring is going through both of those areas. And so when you have nerve rings that are deeper into the tissue, which I've mentioned this one is, this is usually caused by internal disharmony, tension, stress. And so it would make sense that this particular nerve ring is cutting through that liver and that ovary. And then just a whole lot up in this area, as mentioned, in the duodenum and cecum area. So the large intestine, we're starting at the ascending colon here. Okay, so I think that might be just about it for this eye. And then just to recap with the nerve rings, I do think that there's a chance, especially just because I know her history, that some of these impressions, this nervous system, this it's like a flinch response. That's how I feel nerve rings to be. They're reflecting. It's the body's way of reflecting, whether it's an internal flinching due to organ pain, and sometimes it's organ pain that you can't feel, and organs that aren't necessarily connected via the nervous system to send signals to your brain. So even if you can't feel it, a lot of times you'll get the internal nerve rings. And then I do think that there's a good chance that these nerve rings on the periphery of the iris are more related to this, these experiences that she's gone through, these traumas that she's gone through, and that same flinch response, but coming from an outside source. And this, of course, can be, any kind of trauma in general terms. Okay, so other people could also have nerve rings. You could have nerve rings on the periphery of your iris and even deeper within the iris that are caused by external forces. Okay, and then I'm also getting red clover, and which can be purple, and I'm getting that because I know Jensen has mentioned that that's a good herb for it. It contains minerals that are important to the pineal and pituitary glands, and it is somewhat, because the clover has the blossom on the top, it is sort of reflective of that crown chakra. And it's also good for, it's an excellent herb for the blood, for the lymph. And I do like to include it in female formulas. And then with the vitex or the chaste tree berry, as mentioned, for the pituitary gland, that will also be good for the female reproductive system. That reminds me, I think I did see... There's see this slight faint radii solaris here. That would be the rib, technically. The breast is very close to it. And then it's also really close to the arm. Okay, so it could be, let me just check. I'm going to look on my, it's coming up as rib. It's really close to the arm. So this right here is the rib, the arm is below that, and then the breast area is above that. I mean, it all looks pretty good, but there could have been at some point, some trauma to that, to one of the ribs, or there could be tension in the arm. All right, I think that's it for this eye. I'm going to move on to the left, and I'll see you in a second. All right, so we have the left eye up on the screen, and again, we'll be starting in the center with the pupil and the digestive system. So this pupil is just a little bit larger, slightly dilated, and I do believe, because I got a few versions of the left eye, and there was one where it was very dilated. So I'm fairly certain that that was the light, because we also have photographs where the pupil returned to normal size. And so there's just a slight change in the size between the left and right iris. And I do think that that is the lighting. So, but if it weren't the lighting, then we would be looking at the health of the central nervous system. So we do have a very similar situation in the stomach and bowels. We have a decent amount of lacuna and markings and just openings in the iris fibers in the stomach and bowel area. I'm not seeing a delineation between the stomach and the intestines, so there's no stomach halo, which is fairly normal, especially in the brown eye. So I'm going to just trace out, and it's interesting because some of the delineation I'm able to see with the bowel wall is actually more related to shading. And then it's a little bit tricky in here. And then we also have the eyelashes again in the upper eye and the transverse colon. So I want to actually go a little bit slower in this area, because this is the heart area in here. So we have noted in the past, I did a whole video on the heart, that when you're looking at the heart in iridology, you are looking at markings that are on the outside of the bowel wall. So certainly, and this is the descending colon in this area, so stress, malaise, all sorts of dis-ease going on in the descending colon can and will affect the heart, the health of the heart. In this case, I'm not really seeing too much going on in that area. Aside from what we just said, there's definitely in the stomach and bowel area, it does need to be addressed through detox, cleansing, and just, you know, going through a clean food, hopefully a raw food detox protocol, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So I want to talk about the heart while we're here. And actually, I kind of want to finish up with the stomach and bowels. So we do see lymphatic congestion in this area in the stomach and bowels. So I would include in a bowel formula some kind of plant that will help focus on the lymphatic congestion along with everything else needed by the bowels. So for that, I would probably use calendula. And then even just some psyllium powder would be a good start for this area. But I want to note that there are these like little dark, very dark specks, and there's just a few of them, and that's not even what I'm basing what I'm about to say on. But in this kind of environment, there could be a presence of parasites. Okay, so, and specifically the very dark little specks can indicate the presence of parasites. So in iridology, we're not seeing the actual parasites. We're not seeing the contents of the organs, or in this case, the bowels. We are seeing the effects of the activity within those areas. So that's what the dark specks would be indicating. All right, so let's go back to the heart though. The heart area, to me, is right, oops, here. This would be the bottom of the heart. And then up in here, this would be the top of the heart, maybe even more specifically, could possibly be the aorta. And these are very small markings, right? So they are not significant. I'm seeing this as a healthy heart for the most part, but we do have these small little markings in the heart area. So I'm just going to highlight those. And other than that, it seems to be a healthy heart. And then, okay, let's just go from there. So traveling down the eye, well, we do have, of course, the similar nerve rings as in the right eye. They are more on the periphery, and they're just, there's a number of them, and they're sort of concentrated closely together. You can see that they extend. I'm assuming, although I can't say for sure, that they probably go all the way around the eye, but I mean, you can't see it all in this blurry part. But you can see how there's one at least that's extending through the head and brain area. And I believe that was the case in the right eye as well. I don't think I mentioned it, but it was like so slight. And then you can see another one sort of extending into the head and brain area. And this little spot, I mean, it's right along the nerve ring. Is the ear. So we have a nerve ring here, and then the ear is right here. And then, so yeah, I'm not going to highlight those right now, but I want to go down to the first significant marking that I'm seeing. And that is, again, the rib is showing up in this area. So there could have been, it's either tension or there could have been some injury there. And then above that would be the left breast in this area. That's a very slight marking, but I do feel like mentioning it. And then below the rib would be the arm. So again, we could have some inflammation, tension in the left arm as well as the right arm. And then the next significant marking that I'm seeing is the spleen. And this is very close to the descending colon, and we're still pretty much in the descending colon, not quite into the sigmoid colon yet. So I'm seeing this whole area in here related to the spleen, and you can see these markings in the bowel and the descending colon are connected to that. So again, when you have congestion in the colon, oftentimes it will reflex out or refer out toxicity into the area outside of that. And in this case, that's the spleen. We also have the ovary very close by, the left ovary. So I'm not seeing a lot in that ovary, maybe a little bit of inflammation. Now, the spleen's function is, it is a part of the lymphatic system, a very key organ of the lymphatic system, and it filters and transforms the blood. So it destroys old and defunct red blood cells. And by defunct, I mean cells that are irregular and that if left alone could progress into a more serious condition. And it does manufacture new red blood cells. And it also, as a part of the lymphatic system, it removes cellular waste. So it plays a super important role in detoxification, you know, as a part of the lymphatic system, and then especially an important role in immune function. So on a physical level, you could say, and I'm going to go into just a tiny bit of Chinese medicine in a second, the physical spleen is responsible for increasing our defenses. And then according to Chinese medicine, the emotion related to the spleen is worry. And so on a spiritual level, it provides us with protection, confidence, and security. And then without these feelings of security and confidence and protection, we have the better known emotion attributed to the spleen, which is worry. So I do see that as somewhat of a significant sign in the left eye. Okay, and then we also have this whiter pigmentation, light pigmentation that could be indicating inflammation. And we do have nerve rings going through the spleen, also through that rib and arm area. And then again, they're mostly concentrated, which is not unusual for nerve rings to be more on the periphery, but these are especially. And the nerve rings are related to the health of the autonomic nervous system. So along with everything I said in the first video about nerve rings, the sort of startle reaction within the body, or the flinching response, they are related to the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so let's see what else. So these lacuna in this area within the bowel are in the sigmoid colon. So the sigmoid colon is, and you can see over in the iris chart, it's the last part of the colon. And it has some twists and turns, and it transitions into the rectum. And it can hold a lot of toxicity. It typically does. And again, so this would be important for this person to make sure that they are moving their bowels regularly. This is the most common area for waste to be sort of held for too long. And then you can see the somewhat related area. We have the pelvis outside of this area here. So pelvis directly outside of what we're seeing in the sigmoid colon. And then we have the abdominal wall, and closely related to that is the groin. So just some darker shading in there, nothing super significant. And then we're going to go straight to the 6 o'clock. So this You would think maybe the tiny foot, and it's very close. It probably is the tiny foot. So we're looking again, this would be the left leg. But, and especially when I look on my software, it's actually also the kidney and adrenal. So, and we see this sometimes. So tiny foot would be at 6 o'clock, and then this is all kidney, and then the adrenal up at the top. And then again we have, that could be a shadow. I think this is a reflection here, but then this looks like a nerve ring to me. So they're almost like continuous, the nerve ring with the reflection. And then this area in here also is the sigmoid colon. Okay, so, and then we're gonna see the actual rectum in this area, I believe. So the peritoneum and then the rectum here. So there is definitely something going on in the sigmoid colon, congestion, maybe not regular bowel movements, that is affecting the peritoneum and the rectum. So we can see that the kidney and adrenal gland in the left eye, very closely related to that tiny foot, is much less so than in the right eye. And then we also see that there is just a lot less going on in this left eye. So similar features, but you know, it's just not as chronic. I would say this is the tiny foot in pink, and then in blue is the kidney and adrenal, and you can see on the chart how large that space is. So we do have a good deal, a large proportion of the iris chart, and I've mentioned this before, you know, like we have a large proportion of the head, like the head is bigger in the iris than in the body, and the same is true in the kidney, it seems to me anyway. So this is indicating the importance of these areas. Okay, so we have a reflection here. This area in here is the back, so there's a little bit of a marking right here. Could be some tension in the back. Looks like the scapula in this area. Again, we saw the scapula and maybe the upper back. We saw that same thing in the right eye. And then all of this is, we have the esophagus above the scapula, vocal cords. There could be something, see this lighter shading within the bowel wall, inflammation in here, and then the thyroid is outside of that. So I'm not seeing direct markings in the thyroid, but there could be some inflammation, and it's just blurry in there, so I can't really tell. And then what we can see, though, coming off of the small intestine here is the nose. So this would be within and without the bowel wall, and then the nose would be here, and then the eye would be up in this area here. Okay, and then same situation, a little bit of a seemingly dropped transverse colon and just a number of little lacuna within the bowel wall. And then I do want to note also, because I've mentioned some of the emotions of the organs, that the kidneys, because they are showing up so prominently, are the emotion related to the kidneys is fear. And then I also usually like to note that the kidneys they're related to Swadhisthana, which is the second chakra, and that is the water chakra, the place where opposites unite. And the kidneys, it's the chakra of creativity and sexuality, among many other things. But the kidneys also, their function is to filter out the waters of the body. So they filter the blood and the lymph. Okay, so I know it's not a lot with the left eye, especially because we covered so much in the right. We do see some pigmentation in the sclera. You will see that in the true brown iris, and that is just melanin. And then a likely skin ring. And I think that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any questions. And take good care, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.